Hello and welcome to Media MD, your fortnightly dose of media that you have somehow missed. I'm Reuben Morehouse.
And I'm Elliot Diebold.
And this fortnight, Elliot, we are back to talk again about Sapiens.
Yes. So, you read it? You read
I did read it. You read it and then we talk about it. That's how this thing works.
Well, you got through the whole thing, or?
I did. I read the entire thing, and I'll talk about that a bit later. But first, let's do the traditional plot summary, shall we? So you described the full title of this book as last fortnight as Sapiens: A Brief History of Humankind, and that's like it, you know.
Yeah.
It's a bit weird to do a plot summary, but it starts when we're just one genus of one species of the genus Homo, you know, and then we do our thing, and we just kind of explore different snapshots of history, kind of. He explores the history of humankind at different points, mainly through the framing device of three important revolutions, which are the cognitive revolution, which allows humans to think and adapt and stuff, the agricultural revolution, which is obviously domestication of plants and animals, and then the technological revolution. So kind of industrial revolution to now.
Yeah.
And that's a pretty good framing device. I liked it. It definitely felt like we were taking a look at the three most important, you know, periods in humanity's history, the periods of change, and taking a look at the reasons behind those, and seeing where we kind of got up to, how we got up to where we're at now.
Well, and he also, you know, spends a bit of time, towards the start and end of each section, sort of comparing it to the other ones, which helps sort of frame the journey, I guess.
Yeah, it's interesting. One of the interesting things that I guess I kind of would have known if I had thought about it, but I didn't think about it, and this book pointed it out, which is going to be a recurring theme, I think.
Yeah, there's a lot of those moments as you read this book.
Is the idea that the average person, you know, during agricultural times, during medieval times or whatever, actually had a worse life than we did when we were hunter-gatherers. They would eat less and work harder. For less reward, basically. So that's one little thing. And let's talk about that to start off with. This book had a lot of really kind of fun facts, you know?
Yeah.
I think that's what I liked about it the most, was it was just fun little things that I didn't know or that I didn't think about. The first one that really got me was he spends a while talking about the other species of Homo that existed back when we didn't really have language to the extent that we do now, and how it really is just kind of a fluke that we're the dominant species and not, you know, Neanderthals or these other humans which are the same genus as us, but they were only, you know, 1 meter tall or something like that.
Yeah.
It's interesting to think about, and it's something that I never really would have thought about.
Yeah, it's definitely, and you know, because he talks a bit about how all these other genuses had sort of spread and they all had their own niche. And it was really Sapiens that just sort of came through and was like, I can do all of that.
Yeah.
And wiped all the others out as it went.
Well, really, they were better than us at things that would have been useful in that time. Like, they were better hunters or better gatherers, you know? We just kind of had, advantages of, you know, really specific things that only really made themselves an advantage when we kind of evolved a bit and got language and started getting bigger societies and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really liked that about the book. There were a lot of like fun facts, and I could spend 20 minutes right now just kind of reading through a bunch of the different facts that I really liked. The way I digested this book was I was just reading it, and then every, 20 minutes I would just message a fun fact to my girlfriend as I was reading, and she'd be like, "Oh, you're reading Sapiens again, huh?" Like, yeah. Here's a fun fact for you. Monkeys prefer fake monkeys that look more like them acting as their mothers that can't nourish them than, wire monkeys that can nourish them, or whatever it is,
Yeah.
I butchered that fact and sped through it a bit as an example, but whatever. That's the first thing I really liked about the book, is it the kind of fun factness of it. And I do think the book was written in a very entertaining way. I think it had quite a humorous tone at a lot of points.
Yeah, definitely. He writes it for a normal person. You don't have to be an academic to appreciate the book, which I liked.
Yeah, that's good. Although at times I kind of got annoyed by something that he did a fair amount, which was he would explain something and then he would throw in an analogy. That was kind of the way he would always do it. And sometimes the explanations were thorough enough that I was like, all right, I get it. And then he would spend like the next 4 paragraphs on an analogy, and I'm like, all right, I don't need this. I don't need you to compare this to a car manufacturing company for me to understand it. I already get it.
Yeah, I guess sometimes it can cross over from being easy to understand to condescending, but
yeah, it's for a mixed audience, so I can kind of get that.
Yeah, well, I'd rather it be a bit condescending in parts than just uncomprehendable.
Yeah. Yeah. So, putting that aside, I really did like the way this book kind of was written. An example is he starts out with just kind of a timeline of human history. And there are lines like, Sapiens settle Australia, extinction of Australian megafauna, which are very kind of tongue-in-cheek, overtly pointing out some of the themes that we're going to get into later in the book, which I thought was pretty funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, so on the whole, I quite liked it, but there were a few things that I didn't like about it. But actually, let's jump back to this. I have a question for you, Elliot. How quickly did you read this book? How long did it take you to read this book?
So I was listening to the audiobook, and I reckon I was probably about a month, really. Audiobooks tend to be a bit slower in my experience, but yeah, probably about a month to get through the whole audiobook. Yeah.
I would have guessed it was something like that, because I think because of the format of this show, I read this book too quickly.
Yeah. Well, that's why I was a bit surprised when you finished it, because in my experience, non-fiction's a bit heavier, so you don't tend to chew through it as quickly as you can with fiction.
Yeah. I really enjoyed the book, and I wanted to finish it so I could give a full picture when we were talking about it here. But in hindsight, I think I should have slowed down a bit more, because a lot of the things that are talked about, I think are meant to be read and then sat with for a few days. Like,
sure, yeah.
Each of the chapters, I think, is presenting a different point. One chapter's, hey, this is how money became involved in human society, and this is what impacts it has, and stuff like that, right? And reading that and then jumping straight into the next chapter, which is, now we're going to talk about the political inherent politics of like the economy or whatever. And it's like, oh, I should have probably just sat with the previous chapter and digested it and absorbed it and thought about it more before I moved on.
Yeah, that's definitely true, because like with audiobooks, you're only listening to, an hour at a time tops. And so even within chapters, you take time to sort of think on it between listening.
Yeah, exactly. And I think I would read maybe 2 chapters a day or something like that. And it was, I was still enjoying it a lot, but I do think I was missing out on part of the kind of letting it sit nature of this book. And maybe over the next 2 or 3 weeks, it will sit with me and I'll reflect on it more. But I think I've kind of cut off a bit of the power of the book based on the format, which I think was a mistake.
Yeah, sure.
I want to talk about something you said, the reason that you said you brought this book forward last fortnight, which was talking about kind of different ways to think, right?
Yeah.
I'm interested to hear more about that now that I've read the book. Your thought process around like what different kind of mindsets you would get out of it.
Yeah, because I didn't want to go into too much sort of detail, because I don't think it really makes sense unless you're familiar with the content of the book. But it's sort of related to the fun facts you were talking about. Like, I think as he's going through a lot of these things, like you were just talking about how there's the chapter on like currency and how currency became so important, and often the way he breaks these things down and compares how they work in our modern society, it's just, I guess it's things I'd never normally think about. Like, it's going back to that thing of things maybe you would have known if you'd sat down to think about it, but I never had.
Right.
So like, I think the one example I really sort of remember is there's a section where he compares Catholic priests to lawyers early on in the book.
Okay.
And talks about how they're both imaginary concepts. and that really jumped out to me. That was the first moment that I was like, oh, that's something I never would have thought about like that. That's really cool.
Sure. Yeah, so to elaborate on that point a bit more, he talks about how one of the strengths that allowed human societies to grow beyond maybe 50 to 60 people was our ability to share common delusions, I guess is the right way to say it.
Yeah.
So like a belief in the economy is one modern example, right? Money isn't a tangible thing, but we all have belief in it, which gives it power, and that allows us to interact with people, complete strangers, just based on the fact that we share a common belief in the power of money, right?
Yeah, and he uses the term imaginary, but like he does sort of like I worry because he defines sort of exactly how he's using a lot of these terms. Like he says money is imaginary, and what that means is it just has like a $2 coin has no inherent tangible value beyond the precious metals, but if everyone believes it has value, then that's just as important as if it was like. So the word imaginary isn't dismissive of the value, it's just descriptive.
Yeah, totally. I get what you mean, but I think to me a lot of those weren't new ways to think. It was just well, I guess it was new ways to think, but only new ways to think in specifically constrained situations. There's no...
Oh, yeah, definitely.
I don't feel like there's knowledge that I'm carrying forward that I can apply to other areas based off of this book.
No, and I mean, I sort of said that. I was like, I don't think that this has become like, my new like Bible or way of thinking. I just like the way it sort of gave you lots of examples of different ways to look at everyday things in your life, and that's something I've sort of carried through in the second book as I've been reading. That is trying to just enjoy those moments of looking at things you have in your everyday life and thinking about them differently. Yeah.
Well, okay, let's talk about the second book. So this book is, well, I'll talk about it with relation to this first. This book obviously starts at the very start of the history of what we would call humans today, but what the book refers to as sapiens, because humans means any species of the genus Homo. So he makes that distinction early, and it's, okay, cool. We'll call it sapiens. We start at the early history of sapiens, and we go forward all the way until the present day. And then the final chapter is taking a bit of a look forward, right? Talking about what's going to happen next. What could be the next big revolution, or are we already in the next big revolution and it's gonna be this, whatever. He talks about things like more intense genetic modifications, or like cybernetic enhancement of humans to be the next kind of species, or things like that. But it's only in one chapter. It's about 15 or 20 pages, and it definitely felt like it was very rushed. It felt like he was condensing another book into, 20 into one chapter, and it kind of had this weird ending where I was like, oh, this doesn't feel like a satisfying conclusion to quite an enjoyable book. But presumably, from what I know about the second book, that's what he talks about in the next book, right? Is what happens next.
Yeah, so I'm only about halfway through it, so like I obviously don't have the complete picture. But yeah, he's essentially taking the same sort of formula where what he's doing is breaking down each sort of big change that's happened recently and how he thinks it's going to affect us in the future. So for instance, the other day I was listening to a whole section on it was talking about how humans might relate with whatever replaces the concept of sapiens, because he's like, even if it's genetic engineering, technically those wouldn't be sapiens anymore. And so, he was sort of talking about that. So he compared it to animals. So he cheats a little bit. He brings in a lot of similar types of stuff that he talked about in Sapiens. But he does put enough of a different spin on a lot of it to make it not a complete rehash. But he spent ages looking at, throughout humankind's history, how we've had relationships with animal species, because that's the best marker we've got to know how we might interact with future, human species. And, it's not a great look, is basically the conclusion he came to.
Yeah.
Especially when you compare the other, Homo genuses that we just wiped out.
Yeah, we either fought or bred with to extinction.
Yeah.
Okay, it felt like it was weird and a bit tacked on to the end of this book. I don't know how I would have done it better, because obviously the book was going from past to present, and then it needed some kind of end. So obviously a little bit of future is the right end there, but it felt very rushed,
Yeah, I didn't really get that impression as I was listening to it, but I also knew at that point that there was the second one that was focused on the future, so I maybe was just sort of not that interested in hearing the one chapter summary of what I knew was a book I was going to read at some point anyway.
Yeah, fair enough. Before I give it a score, I'm curious, what's your favorite, fun fact that you got out of this book, Elliot? I'm putting you on the spot.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember some of them now. It's been a while since I read this one. There's a good one in Homo Deus. Can I cheat and use?
Oh, please, yeah. Let's hear a future fun fact.
Well, no, this one's actually about a tribe in India who he's talking about how humans' opinions of animals changed over time. And there was this tribe in India that defined animals in two categories as to whether they had agency or not. So like trees and crops did not have agency, and neither did cows or other domesticated animals, but elephants and tigers and insects did, because they were free. So it was just to justify their domestication and killing of like cows, they just lessened them to being the equivalent of trees, whereas
to not
insects
being conscious.
Yeah.
Interesting. That is a fun fact. Cool. So, I guess I should give this book a number out of 10.
Do it.
I think the answer is going to be 7.5. I just kind of liked the experience of reading it. There was enough kind of, regardless of whether I got anything out of the overarching theses of the book, I think there was enough fun facts peppered in that just made it an enjoyable experience to read.
Yeah, I'd actually completely agree with all of that. Yeah, that's exactly the impression I have.
All right. So yeah, I think I will check out Deus as well. I think it sounds interesting enough.
Yeah, give it some time. Like, I've waited a couple of months between reading Sapiens and Deus, and I think that was a good thing.
Yeah. Anyway, putting that fortnight aside, let's talk about next fortnight, because I'm going to be bringing you a show, Elliot. Yep. A TV show. We're going back to our old staples. That every time we talk about this, I'm surprised again that you haven't seen this show.
Yeah, it's good to finally be having this conversation during the recording and not just on Facebook or something again.
Yeah, so obviously the premise of our show, Media MD, is things that you've somehow missed, And look, let's be honest, sometimes we stray a bit from that goal. Sometimes it's things that it's perfectly justifiable for someone to have missed, but this one I'm actually genuinely surprised. So I'm talking about the Netflix original show called The Good Place.
Yeah.
How much do you know about it, Elliot?
I know a bit, because I think I saw a bit of press stuff as it was first coming out. Like, it's Michael Schur behind the scenes, which was like a reason I had it down as something I was going to watch eventually, because he's the guy who did like The Office and Parks and Recreation and Brooklyn
Nine-Nine.
And
he did Cheers as well, didn't he?
I'm not sure. But
I think
the point is he's got a very solid sitcom resume.
Yep.
And then also Kristen Bell, I'm a huge fan of as well. So she's the lead, I'm pretty sure.
She is the lead. And it's one of the reasons I'm so surprised that you haven't seen this. Let me give you a little bit of teaser. The show is about a girl who wakes up and she's died. And she wakes up being introduced to the good place, which is analogous to heaven. Is
this just a Bobaverse spin-off?
No, no, she's not a whatever, a von Neumann probe or whatever they're called. But that's all I'm going to tell you. And the reason is this show starts out as just being a kind of sitcom with a loose plot that is kind of emerging. But one of the interesting things about it is they're in their third season now, and each season has been kind of completely different. Not tonally, but plot-wise. I don't want to talk about it too much, but I would thoroughly recommend that if you get into this show, which I fully expect you will, try and finish the first season and see where it goes, because it's very surprising. It's very surprising in a sitcom format just how much it will break the mold.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds interesting.
So that's all I'll talk about it to you about it, but it is very funny, regardless of the cooler things that it's doing. It's just a funny show on its own.
Okay.
Yeah. I guess I'll leave it there. The Good Place. It's on Netflix, so it's very easy to check out, no matter where in the world you are.
Yeah, I think in America it might be NBC or something, but it's like Netflix everywhere else in the world. It's one of those shows, but I don't know.
No.
So
Well, hopefully...
American people, you figure it out. The rest of the world, you should be sweet.
Yeah, actually, speaking about people, the audience people, you guys should watch The Good Place as well, and you can leave us your comments on it, and we may discuss them in next fortnight's episode when we come back to talk about The Good Place. If you want to do those things, you can find all these links to interact with the show on our website, which is mediamdpodcast.com. From there, you can find our Twitter and Facebook if you want to interact with us, or you can find a link to leave us a review on iTunes, which would be very helpful. You can also find links to all our past discussion threads, as well as finding all of the clues for the Media MD ARG. You can help us figure out just who is Dr. MD and why does he have 2 hands. Elliot, why don't you tell the listeners this fortnight's clue?
Strap.
And we will see you next fortnight.